Welcome back, bookworms! You're here with Reading Rendezvous with Natasha. Today, I'm thrilled to continue our journey through Chanda Hahn's Unenchanted series. We have reached Chapter 3 of Book 1, and things are getting even more exciting. We left off after Mina heroically saved Brody's life, grabbing onto him and pulling him back over the railing to safety. Afterward, on the bus ride home, Mina and Nan discuss the events of the day, and we discover Nan's sacrifice of her iPhone to save Mina and Brody. Brody, however, is acting strange. How is Mina going to explain this to her mother? Everyone thinks she's a hero, but she feels like this was all her fault. And now you're all caught up. Are you ready to dive into Chapter 3 with me? Here we go! Unenchanted by Chanda Hahn. Chapter 3. Mina hadn't told her mother what happened at Babushka's, knowing exactly how she would react. Sarah was an extremely overprotective mother, far beyond what seemed normal or even sane. Anytime a crazy, unexplained accident happened to Mina, Sarah would pick up the family and move, no questions asked. Mina wasn't really sure why. In first grade, Mina took a trip to the zoo and was overcome with anxiety as all the animals in the petting zoo started following her around. They had moved the following week. In the fourth grade, Mina's garden variety science project produced 2 car-sized pumpkins overnight. They moved the next day. In 7th grade, during home ec, Mina kept falling asleep during her knitting projects. Sarah told the school it was mono, and their family was packed by the time Mina got home. Mina knew that what happened yesterday was worse than any of her other unpleasant accidents, which is why she kept the list. She hoped to one day find a hidden link between these disasters and figure out what made her mother want to move. For now, she was lucky that her mother wasn't close to any of the moms from school. If she were, Mina might already have found their small apartment packed up in boxes and a moving truck in the alley. "Mina!" Sarah peeked her head into her daughter's room. The door almost immediately stopped by the piles of teenage debris. When Mina didn't answer, Sarah braved the obstacle course of clothes and magazines and walked into her daughter's dark room to open the blinds and window. "Ah, Mom!" Mina answered, throwing the comforter back over her head to protect herself from the onslaught of fresh air and light, both of which were toxic to a very sleepy teenager. Grumbling, she curled up under the covers and tried to ignore her mother's movements throughout her room. All she wanted was to lie in bed, comatose for another few hours as she gathered strength to face another day at school. Was that too much to ask? When Sarah stubbed her toe on an unidentified object, she let out a gasp of pain, but held back any forthcoming remarks. Mina bit her lip guiltily under the covers, knowing she really needed to clean up her room. She was grateful that her mother never harangued her about it. "We're leaving now. I have to pick up a few things before taking Charlie to school. I'll be late coming home after I drop off a packet at the Carmichael's residence. Be home for dinner, okay?" "Wait, the Carmichaels? No way!" Mina shrieked, sitting up in bed and throwing the comforter behind her. "I mean, don't they have live-in maids? Why would they want to employ another company?" Mina knew that whatever happened, she could not let her mother go to the Carmichaels. What if they told her mother about what happened at the bakery? What if they tried to thank Sarah? Or worse, what if her mother became the Carmichaels' maid? No, Mina could not let that happen. "Well, maybe they heard what a great job we do and want to hire the best. We definitely could use the extra money." Sarah looked at the piles of clothes and sighed wearily. "What if I do it? Mina shot out without thinking. Do what, honey? Sarah nudged a pair of dirty socks with her shoe over to what she assumed was a dirty clothes pile. Mina had to think fast. I lent Brody my notes, so I have to go over there today anyhow. So give me the Happy Maids packet, and I'll drop it off for Mrs. Carmichael. Sarah thought about it. Well, that would work, because then I wouldn't be late to the Browns. Why, thank you, Mina. Sarah smiled. Mina tried and failed to return her mother's smile when she realized the full implications of what she'd volunteered to do. Mina was an idiot. Sarah put the packet on the kitchen table, and Mina watched as she and her younger brother, wearing a Superman cape, headed out the door. Mina ran back into her bedroom, grabbed a purple pillow off her bed, and screamed into it, dancing around the room. Green movement captured Mina's attention, and she froze when she realized that her mother had opened her window and blinds. Mrs. Orne, the 80-year-old cat lady from the building next door, was watching her with one eyebrow fully raised. She'd happened to be watering her window box full of daisies when Mina made her dancing debut, and now was likely drowning them. "Sorry, Mrs. Orne," Mina called, and dashed to the ledge to close the window and blinds. Looking at the clock, Mina was glad to see that she had woken up with plenty of time to take a shower. Grabbing her robe, she flung it over the top of the shower bar and began to work on the infinite twists and turns of the shower spigots. It was easier to crack a double combination safe than it was to coax hot water out of these ancient pipes. Mina said a quick prayer to the god of plumbing and bathroom fixtures, and after a few spurts of murky brown water, hot water eventually began to rain down. After a quick and refreshing shower, she donned her blue terry bathrobe and slippers and pulled on the ancient porcelain bathroom doorknob. She must not have prayed hard enough to the god of bathroom fixtures, because the bathroom door handle came off in her hands. No! No, no, no! This can't be happening! Mina pounded frantically on the door and called for help before remembering her mother and brother had left early. She desperately tried to reattach the door handle, but all she succeeded in doing was pushing the other one out the other side. Mina bit back a scream of frustration. Getting on her knees, she tried to look through the bathroom hole and find out what sort of lock it was. After assessing the situation, she discovered she had no clue what it was or how to get out. Frantically, she began to pull out drawers and open cupboards to look for something she could jam in the hole and turn the door. She tried several different things, her mother's tweezers, and her hairbrush, which was too thick. She had nearly given up her search when finally her eyes fell on the toothbrush holder. Would it work? Should she try? Grabbing the fattest toothbrush, which happened to be Charlie's, Mina inserted it handle first and gave it a few turns. It pulled on the lock a bit, but not enough to release the catch. Opening up another drawer, Mina grabbed a nail file and inserted it between the door frame and the catch. If she could budge the latch enough to push the nail file through, she'd be free. For the next few minutes, she pushed the file against the catch, carefully twisting the toothbrush back and forth until eventually she felt the door slide open in response. Mina could almost have cried in relief. Just another reason to talk to her mother about getting a cell phone. But this latest debacle had made her late for school. Throwing clothes on, she grabbed a violet zippered hoodie and ran out the door and across the lawn, having to double back only once to grab the Happy Maids packet from the kitchen table. After pedaling for 2 blocks on her bicycle, Mina heard a slight mewing noise. Looking down, she saw an orange tabby cat keeping pace just to her right. Mina swerved a few feet to the right to avoid the cat and almost ran over a large dog that was now on the left of her bike. Yikes! Mina stood up and tried to pedal harder to outdistance the animals, but after a few more labored breaths, she looked behind her and they were still there. Go away! Shoo! Mina was worried that the dog and cat would continue to follow her and get hit by a car. They sped up and seemed to be chasing Mina. Who would have thought a dog and cat together would be chasing her on her bike? A loud screech and the large colorful object flying toward her head was the only warning that Mina had of a rooster propelling himself from a nearby fence. Ducking, Mina swerved and almost lost control of the bike. What the? This was the oddest thing that had happened to Mina in a while. She turned her head to see the rooster land behind her next to the dog and cat, and it seemed to join in on the chase. Turning her head, Mina had only a split second to register that there was a large animal directly in her path and slammed on her brakes. Too late. Mina lost control and flew headlong over the handlebars of her bike to land crumpled on the sidewalk. In that instant, Mina recognized the animal that caused her wreck, but she couldn't believe it. It was a donkey, in the middle of town, and was it wearing a hat? Shivering and sore because of her wet hair and skinned hands, Mina rode slowly the rest of the way to school. She decided today was turning into another epic disaster. When she hit the sidewalk, she must have blacked out for a split second. Either that or she was hallucinating, because when she dusted off her hands and looked around, there was no sign of the donkey, rooster, dog, or cat. There was no evidence that they were ever there. Mina ran up and down the block looking for the donkey, but with no success. Maybe it wasn't a donkey? Maybe it was another large dog? She didn't even bother pulling up to the bike rack, but threw her bike on the ground, her feet pounding the pavement as she ran up the stairs and into the school. Mina glanced at her watch. She was 5 minutes late for class. Keeping her head down, she tried to walk as fast and as quietly as she could, hoping to avoid the hall monitors. Maybe if she pleaded hard enough with her first-hour teacher, she would have pity and avoid writing a tardy slip. Yeah, right. Her teacher, Mrs. Porter, had her back to the door and was writing on the whiteboard, so Mina slipped into the classroom and tried to nonchalantly slide into her desk next to Nan. Mina took a quick peek at the rigid spine of Mrs. Porter, noticing that the teacher never turned or made any movement to acknowledge her late entrance. She turned slightly and began to shuffle some papers around on her desk. She didn't even glance Mina's way. Mina was just about to breathe a sigh of relief when Mrs. Porter walked over and dropped a tardy slip on her desk, with Mina's name written in perfect penmanship across the top. She never even saw her teacher fill out the form. Mina took the yellow slip of paper between her shaking fingers and looked toward Mrs. Porter's desk in confusion. Mrs. Porter's thin, pale lips tightened into what could only be described as an inhuman smile. "I find that it saves time if I fill out your tardy slips in advance, Miss Grime. It's less of a distraction for the class, and you seem to be the only one that has this peculiar problem." She held up a stack of the small carbon copy yellow forms and spread them so everyone could see her name printed on the next 5 tardy slips. "As you can see, you haven't disappointed me yet." Her eyes tried to crinkle as she laughed, but everything looked strange and awkward on her. She was so old that the whites of her eyes were no longer white, but a pasty gray. Her teeth looked like faded yellow parchment, and her clothes seemed to have come from the 1950s. Everything about Mrs. Porter was a throwback to some other era and time. Even the antique candy bowl that sat on her desk with ancient, uneaten candy corn seemed forlorn and out of place amongst the high-tech gadgetry of the classroom. Mrs. Porter had been with the school since it first opened, and she refused to retire, which was why she only taught homeroom or study hall. While other teachers had moved on to video chat guest speakers and live televised distance learning, her teaching methods were so far outdated that she made fuzzy 70s-era VHS tapes seem modern. Mina guessed she had never so much as touched a computer. But there was one thing that Mrs. Porter did and did well, and that was discipline. She prided herself on handing out the most detention slips and tardy notices, explaining that the other teachers had gone soft. Mina shrank into her seat, crumpling the tardy notice and stuffing it into her pocket. It wasn't fair that she was always late. Most of the time it was out of her control. Biting her lip, she tried to study her algebra notes when a persistent foot kept nudging her Converse. Mina looked up into the excited eyes of Nan, who was being careful to mouth her words so as not to be overheard. "Have you heard? There is an assembly about you," she mouthed. "What?" Mina said audibly. Quickly she ducked her head and buried it in her notebook, just as Mrs. Porter swung around at the noise. The woman might be old, but she had hearing like a bat. Mina pretended to scribble in her book, and out of the corner of her eye she watched as Nan pursed her lips and tapped her pencil on her book as if solving a complicated problem. Mrs. Porter scanned the room, and then turned her back and continued her writing. Nan blew out a breath of air that made her bangs float in the air before resting nonchalantly on her cheek. Her hair always looked effortless. She raised her eyebrow at Mina as if waiting for a response. Mina glanced at the back of her teacher and shook her head. Nan scribbled in her notebook and flipped up the edge so Mina could see what she'd written. News reporters, photographers, media in the gym. Mina's brows furrowed in confusion. "Why?" she mouthed quietly this time. Nan gave an exasperated head bob that could only mean one word, "Duh," and began scribbling in her notebook. This time, only 3 words appeared. "You and Brody." Mina's head began to shake back and forth in disbelief. This was exactly the kind of debacle she was afraid would happen. What if her mom found out and made them move? Nan widened her eyes, nodding slowly in affirmation. If someone else had looked at Mina and Nan right then, they would have seen 2 bobbleheads at war. Nan stopped nodding, scribbled in her notebook, and held it for Mina to read. "Promise me that I get an insider's scoop?" Mina rolled her eyes but whispered, "Fine." Nan used her hand to cross her heart. Mina smiled and did the same, the whole time shaking in her shoes. With a few more quick notes, Mina was able to discern what she had missed by being late that morning. The assembly would be held at second period in the gym. What was supposed to be a glorifying rally seemed more like an executioner's sentence. Why couldn't she be more like the other kids and enjoy these things? Instead, she was terrified and tried to think of ways to escape. Maybe she could feign sickness and go home? One look at Mrs. Porter made Mina realize it'd never work. She would make her tough it out, or maybe go so far as to escort her to the nurse's office herself. Any other period, and she could come up with some excuse and slip out unnoticed. But not this one. Her only other option would be to leave as soon as the bell rang. The 45-minute class seemed to drag on, and Mina gave up trying to study for her algebra class. Her eyes began to water from staring at the clock for so long. With only 1 minute left, Mina grabbed her bag and was moving toward the door 1 second before the bell sounded. Yes! Mina escaped the room and had just turned right down the hallway and toward the exit when she walked into Principal Hahn. "Ah, Mina! Just the person we were looking for. Please, come with me." His heavy hand on her shoulder felt like a manacle snapping around her neck. She watched someone exit the school doors, and the sound of them closing reverberated in her ears. Mina winced. Principal Hahn? I'm not feeling well this morning, and I think it would be beneficial if I went home immediately." She tried to slump her shoulders and look sick. "You can't leave now. We have something very special planned for you." He brushed off her terrible acting and shuffled towards the office, pulling her alongside him. In the background, Mina heard the noise of lockers being shut and the excitement of students moving toward the gym. They love any excuse to skip class. Principal Hahn guided Mina into his office and had her sit in one of the chairs facing his desk. His office was decorated with pigs, and lots of them. Ceramic pigs, plastic bobbleheads, stuffed pigs, even a Hog Heaven monthly calendar. Everywhere you looked, there were pigs, mostly because his secretary gifted him with a pig decoration for every occasion. Mina knew she had become a lost cause for tardiness when she began naming the pigs. She stared dejectedly at a ceramic pig with a red polka dot tie perched on Principal Hahn's desk. This one she had previously named Lucky, because he was the least stupid-looking of the collection. Principal Hahn slumped into his chair and had a moment of awkwardness as his chair slid back 3 feet from the desk. After a few grunts and pushes, he maneuvered the chair back to the desk. Mina did her best to keep a straight face. "As you may have heard, Channel 6 and the Herald Stadium are here to do an interview with you about your heroic efforts yesterday. What I need to know, Mina, is whether you love your school." "I don't understand, Principal Hahn." Principal Hahn coughed. "Well, Mina, what I should be asking is maybe how much you like your fellow students and friends like Nan Taylor. It would be a shame if our school lost funding and had to cut programs because of bad publicity." "How could this be bad publicity? I'm not sure I understand your question. Of course I love this school. I'm just terrified of giving an interview and would really prefer not to. So if you could find a way out for me, that would be incredible." "Mina, you have to do the interview. I just want to make sure that you don't place blame on Mr. West for the incident that happened at Babushka's. If it was publicized that he wasn't there when the accident occurred, it could be seen as negligence, and we could lose our most valued supporters and be forced to cut funding or even, God forbid, fire Mr. West. The Carmichaels have a lot of powerful friends. I need to know whether you think Mr. West is to blame for the accident." Mina was at a loss for words. "Of course he's not. He wasn't the one to blame. It was no one's fault. Just an accident." Mina had almost admitted the truth. How could she place blame on an absent teacher when she knew that even if Mr. West was there, the same events would have unfolded with the same outcome? It was just her bad luck that followed her everywhere. Principal Hahn smiled brightly. "Excellent! Glad to hear it. Well, we'd better get you to the gym." He stood up and ushered Mina out the door, following close on her heels. "No, really, I'm not feeling that well and would rather go home," Mina pleaded. In retrospect, she wished she had used the time in his office to try to blackmail him into letting her go home. But it was too late now. Again, Principal Haim ignored her. "Make sure you tell the reporters how much you love our school. We would love to get a new pool installed, you know. Good publicity equals good funding." "But Now's your time to shine, Miss Grime. Do your school proud." Principal Haim escorted Mina down the corridor, and before she knew it, she was through the doors into the gym. "There she is!" Nan yelled, waving at the reporters while pointing to Mina. Yep, Mina thought to herself, she was definitely gonna kill Nan. Principal Haim sauntered proudly to the center and took the mic from Vice Principal Maris. "And here she is, Kennedy High School's own real-life heroine, Wilhelmina Grime!" He started clapping into the microphone, which caused a chain reaction amongst the whole student body. Mrs. Colbert, the music teacher, came forward and gently led nervous Mina to the half-court line in the gym. Principal Haim heartily slapped her on the back as if she were a linebacker instead of a 5'4" girl. Mina had just choked back a snappy retort when a bright flashing light blinded her. Photographers appeared from nowhere. The band started playing the school theme song, and the whole student body began stomping on the bleachers. No longer was the air filled with cries of slimy grimy, loser or nerd, but her name. The students were chanting her full and much hated, antiquated name, Wilhelmina Grimes. Everyone except for one tall, good-looking boy. Mina felt her heart sink when she saw that Brody Carmichael wasn't standing with the other students, chanting or cheering for her. He was sitting in the front row, chewing on his lip. Just sitting and staring at her, brows furrowed, leaning forward to see her over the crowd. She couldn't even begin to discern the emotions on his face. "Mina, tell us what happened at Babushka's bakery the day you saved the Carmichael's son from certain death." The reporter from the Channel 6 news station thrust a microphone in front of Mina's face. Another flash from the Herald Stadium newspaper photographer caught her off guard, making her dizzy. But that wasn't what irritated Mina. It was the reporter's poor choice of words. "He has a name," Mina shot back, furious that the reporter would refer to Brody as the Carmichael's son and not by his name. She thought he deserved better. "Of course he does," the reporter countered. "Are you going to answer the question?" "Not until you rephrase your question." "Now, Mina," Principal Haim interjected, "now's not the time to argue semantics. They are doing a lovely story on our school and on you because of what happened yesterday. It would be good publicity and may even help us get grants for our library." "Of all the self-centered, harebrained," Mina muttered under her breath, knowing that no one outside of the few feet around them could hear them over the band. What a game the principal was playing! Earlier he'd mentioned a pool, and now it was a library. Now remember, it's for the good of the school," Principal Haim chided. Fine. There was some roughhousing on the catwalk, and someone fell into Brody Carmichael. Mina spoke his name loudly, and he fell over the safety railing. "And you saved him?" the reporter asked. Did she detect a note of sarcasm in his voice? "Yeah, I guess I did. I wasn't thinking. I just reacted, and grabbed for him and got his backpack. I started to go over the railing too, except that Nan," Mina pointed to her friend who was screaming in the bleachers. grabbed me, and saved both of us. Nan Taylor is the real hero of the story, not me. She even sacrificed her iPhone in the attempt to save us." As soon as Mina directed the attention to Nan, the reporter and her flock of photographers moved on and up the bleachers towards a surprised Nan. "That was a brave thing you did." Mrs. Colbert leaned in and whispered over her shoulder. Mina shrugged. "I didn't do anything special. Only did what anyone else in my situation would have done." "I'm sure that's not the case, but you can keep telling yourself that if it helps you sleep better." Mrs. Colbert smiled knowingly. Her short, spiky hair and blue-colored, wing-tipped glasses gave her an approachable edge, though her quips and riddles often left Mina more confused than enlightened. "Why are they not interviewing Brody? I thought for sure they would be all over him." Mina glanced over her shoulder to see Brody looking furious and glaring in her direction again. She swallowed nervously. "They can't. The Carmichael family has forbidden the newspapers from harassing their son." "But I thought no one could silence the media." Mina looked back up toward where Brody was now sitting. Not a single photographer bothered him. Another flash of light in Mina's direction, and she was seeing stars again. "That's what they want you to think, but the biggest pocketbook speaks loudest." She grinned, causing her cheek to dimple. "They allow their own names, photos, and stories to be printed, but the Carmichaels control all publicity regarding their son." Mrs. Colbert walked away to settle down Steve and Frank, who had taken their shirts off and were waving them above their heads, trying to get on the news. Through the next hour, Mina stayed in the gym, retelling the same story over and over. Just when she didn't think it could get any more humiliating, it did. By lunchtime, she was on YouTube. "That was exciting!" Nan gushed as she pushed her tray along the lunch line. She was wearing another black shirt, this time dedicated to a certain sparkly vampire. She picked up an apple, turkey sandwich, and a pink frosted cupcake from the line and swiped her lunch card through the electronic reader. Mina was too stressed to eat. She grabbed a chocolate milk from the cooler and paid, following Nan to their favorite table by the window. They were stopped 3 times by students wanting to take pictures and autographs. "I bet your followers have doubled," Mina commented, as Nan waved cheerily at the group of freshmen who kept pointing and whispering. "Tripled, but who's counting?" She smiled. Obviously Nan was. Mina shook her milk and began to think about her string of bad luck getting to school. "What's with the scowl?" asked Nan. "You wouldn't believe the morning I had." "I know. I was here, remember?" "No, I'm talking about before I even got to school." Mina began to relay the entire morning's events, even up to Principal Haim's office, but Nan only heard one thing. "What?" she squealed, kicking Mina excitedly under the table. "Are you serious? You get to go to Brody Carmichael's house?" "Nan, you're not listening. Something strange is going on. I think I'm going crazy." She looked out the window and could see the sky beginning to turn green, a sure sign that a storm was coming. "You bet you are! I can't believe you didn't tell me about the Carmichaels as soon as you saw me." "You're missing the point." "No, I heard it. You're being terrorized by strange domestic animals. I'll buy you some repellent." "Don't forget the donkey. I don't know if I would call that a domestic animal. What do you make of that?" "You said it yourself. It could have been a large dog. But do you hear yourself? You are going to Brody's house. You've had a crush on him for 2 years. When were you gonna tell me? I'm telling you now. Are you excited? Nan leaned in eagerly, her hands itching for her iPhone. Not really, because I don't plan on going. I was hoping you would go for me. Mina slid the blue folder with the sticker of the Happy Maids logo across the table to Nan. Nan looked at the folder in shock and slid it back. Oh no, this is your dreamy stalker moment, not mine. You do it. I can't, Nan. I just can't. Mina looked at Nan and pleaded silently. I'm not ready to talk to him. Nan peeled the paper from around her cupcake and gave it a bite. If you can't talk to him now, after you saved his life, you're never gonna talk to him. Besides, I have a good feeling about this. Trust me. Mina wished she did trust Nan, but every time Nan said those 2 words, Mina ended up in trouble. So, how's Charlie? Nan said, changing the subject. He's doing well. He really likes the new school. Mina knew why her friend was trying to change the subject, but she let her get away with it. Do they think they can get him to talk? Nan asked, swiping her finger through the frosting on her cupcake. Mina's brother Charlie was born shortly after their father died, and even though the doctors could find nothing wrong with him, he never spoke. They hope so. They seem to think it's because he was in the womb when Dad died, and he absorbed some of Mom's post-traumatic depression or something. What do you think? Nan asked, licking the rest of the frosting from her fingers. I think Charlie doesn't speak because he doesn't need to. You still think he will just one day awake from whatever silent spell he's under and begin talking, like some sort of fairy tale? Nan, you know I don't believe in fairy tales. As soon as the words left Mina's mouth, a crash of thunder shook the cafeteria, and the lights flickered on and off. Girls screamed in fright, and the boys laughed out loud, pointing fingers and trying to re-scare some of the girls. Whoa, freaky. Nan bobbed her head and looked around in wonder. That was cool. They looked out across the campus and could see the wind begin to pick up, but no visible rain yet. It's just a storm, Mina tried to answer carelessly, but her heart was racing with adrenaline. When it finally settled, Mina went on. But Nan, if I believed in fairy tales, then wouldn't there have to be a dashing prince to save me from my pathetic life? Well, you know, Nan began to counter. Forget it. There are no happily ever afters. Look at my mom. She's a maid, for crying out loud. A widowed mother with 2 children. Where's her happy ending? Mina opened her chocolate milk and took a drink. There are no such things as fairy tales. Another crash of thunder shook the metal roof of the ceiling, causing Mina to spill the chocolate milk down her violet jacket. A downpour of rain followed a second after, pinging loudly on the roof. Do you see what I mean? Mina pulled her wet hoodie away from her body as she tried to wipe up the mess with a wad of napkins. I'm cursed to be a loser forever. You know, Mina, Nan said thoughtfully, as she grabbed napkins that didn't have frosting on them to help her friend. Not every tale has a happy ending. In fact, many of them are grim. Thanks for tuning in to Reading Rendezvous with Natasha today. I hope you enjoyed joining me on reading Chapter 3 of Chanda Hahn's Unenchanted. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you're ready to join in on our next chapter. I can't wait to find out what happens next. Later, bookworms!